Conspiracy theorists in the Delphi case believe that Greg Ferenczi, who worked on the FBI task force and was a Terre Haute police detective and helped with the Odin report with Rushville police officer Todd Click, was somehow killed off because he knew too much about the murders of Libby and Abby. The person who killed him was Shane Meehan, a former Terre Haute corrections officer from 2005 to 2017, who was suffering from severe mental illness at the time and had 1,500 pages of medical records showing he was mentally ill. Around 2:15 p.m. on Wednesday, July 7, 2021, Shane Meehan shot Greg Ferenczi as he was coming outside the FBI Indianapolis resident agency in Terre Haute after Shane threw a Molotov cocktail into the building. I don't see how that means Meehan killed him because he knew about the Odinists and he was killed because he was going to reveal it. The FBI BAU report revealed they thought the crime scene with the sticks on the bodies was because they thought it was an undoing, and they didn't think it was an Odinist ritual sacrifice. On February 17, 2022, Indiana State Police Sergeant Stephanie Thompson, who was a polygraph examiner, and her 17-year-old daughter died in a fire at their home. The conspiracy theory is that she was killed off by an Odinist, maybe Elvis Fields, because she gave one of his sisters a polygraph test where it was deemed his sister may have been telling the truth about what Elvis Fields told her. According to the Odinist Memorandum, on February 14, 2017, it claimed Elvis allegedly told one of his sisters that he was in a gang and that he had been on a bridge with two girls that were killed. He told her that someone named Abigail was a pain in the ass and a troublemaker. She said Elvis tried to give her a blue jacket and she told him she had her own jacket. His sister, according to the memorandum, passed a polygraph in relation to information Elvis allegedly told her on February 14, 2017, that was given to her on February 1, 2018 by, I assume, Stephanie Thompson, who tragically died in a fire with her daughter. My question is, why would they wait until February 17, 2022 to set fire to her house? Why wouldn't they do that sometime in 2018 or 2019? I don't think it makes sense. Elvis Fields is not Richard Allen. Richard Allen is Bridge Guy, who was wearing the blue jacket. So, do you think maybe Elvis Fields could have lied, or it was a lie by the defense about the information in regards to the blue jacket, and that polygraph tests are not that accurate and are also not always admissible in court? He could have lied to his sister, but it was the truth, that he lied to her and that she would pass the polygraph. The reason why I think it's made up by Allen's defense attorneys because it's claimed his sister, who they called Mary Jacobs, who Todd Click in the March 18th hearing said her name was Mary Abrams, said that he told her he wanted to give her a blue jacket on February 14th, 2017. So maybe the defense lied about the date to make it seem more suspicious. I haven't seen any proof that Stephanie Thompson and her daughter were murdered in the house fire, which occurred in February 2022. The cause of the fire was classed as undetermined, and fires are hard to investigate when there's no clear source of the fire and there might be no forensics to examine and analyze if considering the possibility it might be murder caused by arson. There's lots of possibilities, and maybe it was murder. I don't see how anyone can put 2 + 2 and make 4 in relation to an Odinist committing the crime because she knew too much. I also haven't seen any proof that Elvis Fields was an Odinist from his social media profiles. I don't really understand the logic behind that theory for someone to think that's true. Or another angle is how a conspiracy theorist would think another police officer would kill her over Delphi. I don't really get that theory either. Another theory that has been brought up is maybe Patrick Westphal with his Vinlander crew killed the Flora Girls, and it's because they're considered a right-wing racist skinhead group, and because Patrick Westphal lived in Flora at one point. I think some of the names brought up in the Flora Fires case file have a higher probability of being involved based on the timeline than the names brought up by Allen's defense in the Odinist Memorandum. Former Rushville police officer Todd Click, who helped Rick Allen's defense with their Odinist ritual Vinlander crew gang theory, got exposed as a shady cop recently, and many people wondered in the Delphi community as to what Nick McClelland was hinting at when he claimed in a filing that he believed Todd Click had employee records that showed he had a Brady Giglio violation. It was revealed on the 4th of October 2024 by the Murder Sheet podcast that 51-year-old Todd Aaron Click, in his role as a family case manager for Ripley County DCS, had been arrested and was charged with 1 count of official misconduct, a level 6 felony, 1 count of forgery, a level 6 felony, and 1 count of obstruction of a child abuse assessment, a Class A misdemeanor. A year-long investigation was going on by the state of Indiana, county of Ripley. It was revealed from the investigation that Todd Click had falsified at least 10 Management Gateway for Indiana Kids entries and forged the signatures of parents' caregivers on at least 7 DC's forms required during the assessment process. Todd Click was seemingly ignoring child abuse cases by not showing up for face-to-face visits and lying and claiming he had in written reports and used forged signatures. The cases were in Ripley County. This investigation was done by law enforcement officer Michael Lepper with the Indiana Office of Inspector General. Todd Click talked to Murder Sheet back in September 2023 after the Odinist memorandum was revealed, and he told them no one in law enforcement believes Abby and Libby were killed in a ritual sacrifice. He said in a statement to them that there are 2 things that I would like to clear up immediately, though. Detective Ferenczi and Detective Murphy were not Rushville cops. Detective Ferenczi was a detective from the Terre Haute Police Department that was assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Detective Murphy was an Indiana State Police detective that was also assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. So the FBI was associated with the investigation until at least July 2021. Secondly, no one in law enforcement believes Abby and Libby were killed in a ritual sacrifice. That is the defense twisting facts for sensationalism. You can quote me on those 2 items. I think Todd Click lacks integrity and still helped Rick Allen's defense after that original statement in September 2023 without proving or providing any proof that any of the Odinist names brought up in the memorandum could be placed near the crime scene or at the Monon High Bridge Trail on the day of the murders, and he admitted that in court that he couldn't. His theory was that Libby and Abby stumbled on the Odinists doing a ritual and they got mad, so they killed the girls. Stadhagalder, or runic yoga, which is still practiced in folk customs in Iceland and parts of Scandinavia, is when a person poses in a certain way to match a rune. I don't think the posing at the crime scene was anything to do with Odinism, in my opinion. I don't think Odinism has anything to do with this crime. I haven't seen proof Allen isn't into Odinism as much as I've seen proof Elvis Fields is an Odinist. I guess it's somewhat interesting to look into from a historical point of view in regards to Odinism if you're into this stuff, but I think the girls' bodies being covered is much more simple than runic posing with sticks meant to be runes over them. I think there's a very small percentage from around 44,000 homicide investigations where sexual posing or body positioning was involved with crime scene staging. But the counter-argument could be made. It won't be made because the third-party culprit argument the defense wanted to use is not allowed with the Odinists, is that no other case with sexual posing, perhaps for different motives, such as sexual fantasy, involved Odinism. Crime scene investigator Major Patrick Cicero was asked by prosecutor Nick McClelland at the 3-day hearing from July 30th to August 1st, 2024, if he had ever seen any other incidents where killers tried to conceal a crime with sticks, and said he has seen other incidents where killers tried to conceal the crime with sticks. Jennifer Jones Auger, working for Allen's defense team, asked him if he thought it was odd that the sticks covered maybe 3% of the girls' bodies and had been arranged in certain ways. Cicero acknowledged the killer may not have done a very good job at concealing the crime. It was also revealed at the 3-day hearing that the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit report did not indicate that they believed that the murders of Libby and Abby was a ritualistic killing and believed it was an undoing and the killer was trying to conceal or hide or undo what he had done by covering the bodies with sticks. Some have argued that just because Richard Allen was there that day on February 13th, 2017, doesn't mean he committed the murders, and I think they aren't taking in consideration the video recorded by Libby German. Another case, which could be compared to a minor extent, is the Shenandoah National Park murders of Laura Lolly Winans and Julianne Julie Williams in May 1996 in Virginia. The lesbian couple were murdered after they were last seen on May 24, 1996, in the Shenandoah National Park at their campsite near Skyland Resort after they took a trip there to hike with their golden retriever, Taj. Their bodies were found on June 1, 1996, after an extensive search by rangers with the National Park Service. Daryl David Rice was allegedly seen by witnesses walking into the park on the day the women were last seen and believed to be murdered on May 24, 1996. On Tuesday, April 9, 2002, 33-year-old Daryl David Rice from Maryland was indicted on 2 counts of capital murder in the alleged hate crime murders of Lolly Winans and Julie Williams. In addition to 2 counts of capital murder, he also faced 2 additional counts of murder on the grounds he intentionally selected the victims because of hatred for homosexuals. Federal sentencing guidelines allowed authorities to charge him with the additional counts. On Thursday, March 11, 1999, after pleading guilty to the attempted abduction charge in September 1998, 31-year-old Daryl David Rice was sentenced to 11 years in prison for trying to abduct a Canadian woman who was riding her bicycle through the Shenandoah National Park. At the sentencing, his victim, Yvonne Malbasha of Ottawa, testified that Rice forced her off Skyline Drive in the Shenandoah National Park with his pickup truck on July 9, 1997, then tried to force her into the truck. Yvonne Malbasha got away and was able to identify him in the truck. Daryl Rice was charged with the 4 counts of murder for the Shenandoah National Park murders when he was in prison serving time for attempted abduction of Yvonne Malbasha, which occurred on July 9, 1997, a year after the Shenandoah National Park murders happened. The FBI had tunnel vision on Rice, and the FBI and the Virginia State Prosecutor believed he could also be the Route 29 stalker and the killer of Alicia Showalter Reynolds, who was abducted on March 2, 1996 by a man in a pickup truck and found in a wooded area 2 months after she disappeared on May 7, 1996, about 15 miles from Culpeper. His DNA did not match the crime scene evidence, and nothing linked him to her murder. His DNA also did not match the crime scene evidence in the Shenandoah National Park murders of Julie and Lolly. The FBI were nearly certain Daryl David Rice committed the murders of the lesbian couple. Daryl David Rice's lawyer found information through discovery that unknown DNA was found and that mitochondrial DNA of another suspected serial killer who died named Richard Mark Evenitz were found. mtDNA is not always generally considered great evidence in court, and the mtDNA evidence are hairs without a bulb or skin attached to the root. 92% of the population in North America were excluded as the source of the mtDNA, according to Rice's defense attorney, and the test pointed to 8% of the population as the source, and Richard Mark Evenitz could not be excluded. An mtDNA match is not the same as nuclear DNA and is not a direct DNA match. The cause of death for both women had been from strangulation, and it was later revealed, decades later, by the FBI that they had been sexually assaulted. On Friday, February 6, 2004, federal prosecutors said that they will drop capital murder charges against Daryl David Rice and pursue new leads in the case. The federal prosecutors changed their stance on Rice because of the new evidence revealed in regards to the mitochondrial DNA in connection with Richard Evenitz. U.S. Attorney John Brownlee said in a statement requesting the case against Rice be dismissed without prejudice. The request meant the federal prosecutors did not want the case against him to be dismissed forever. On Wednesday, February 25, 2004, prosecutors dropped the capital murder charges against Daryl David Rice in the murders of Julianne Williams and Laura Winans. The charges were dropped without prejudice, which meant the government would still be allowed to continue investigating Rice and charge him in the future. On June 20, 2024, the FBI revealed that they had solved the Shenandoah National Park murders, which occurred in May 1996, and announced the identification of a suspect who was not considered to be on the radar at the time of the murders.
Good morning. I'm Stanley Metter, Special Agent in charge of the FBI Richmond Field Office. I'm pleased to be joined here today by Christopher Cavanaugh, United States Attorney for the Western District of Virginia, Colonel Gary Settle, Superintendent of the Virginia State Police, and Christopher Kovleski, Special Agent in charge, National Park Service. We've brought you all here today for an announcement we've been working towards for nearly 3 decades. 28 years ago, 2 women, Laura Winans and Julianne Williams, known by their family and friends as Lolly and Julie, were viciously murdered in Shenandoah National Park. Their murders sparked shock and fear throughout the community and nation. Today, we are proud to stand here and tell you we now know who is responsible for this heinous crime. While we have been eager to share the news, it was most important for us to tell Lolly and Julie's families first. Yesterday, our case agent and victim specialist spoke with the families. This morning, U.S. Attorney Cavanaugh, Colonel Settle, SAC Kovleski, and I also spoke with the families. We can't imagine how extremely hard it is for the family members to receive this information. They've been seeking answers for far too long. Without going into too much conversation, I can tell you they were grateful for the people who worked on this case, for the resources, and for helping to provide closure. Soon after I came to lead the FBI Richmond Field Office in 2021, I was briefed on the unsolved murders of Lolly and Julie. We assigned a new investigative team. The team conducted a methodic review of everything in our case file. They reassessed leads, re-examined evidentiary items, photos, and interviews. One thing we had to look closely at was advancements in DNA and any DNA testing and any additional resources that could be used to support further analysis. I can't stress enough the countless hours in research that went into determining what items would be suitable for retesting. Once we identified those items, our team secured funding through the Department of Justice's Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, also known as SAKI, which is administered through the Virginia Attorney General's Office. The approved grant allowed us to leverage the assistance of an accredited private lab to submit items for analysis. As a result of these examinations, DNA was successfully pulled from several items of evidence. From it, analysts obtained a CODIS-eligible profile. CODIS is the FBI's combined DNA index system. It contains DNA profiles of convicted offenders, unidentified subjects, and missing persons. Today, we are here to tell you our positive match is to Walter Leo Jackson Sr., a convicted serial rapist, originally from the Cleveland, Ohio area. Even though we had this DNA match, we took additional steps and compared evidence from Lolly and Julie's murders directly to a buccal swab containing Jackson's DNA. Those matched results confirm a certainty that is rarely seen. 1 in 2.6 trillion. Sadly, as a result of the retests and further DNA comparisons, we are now able to say both Lolly and Julie were sexually assaulted. Jackson, who went by the name Leo, had a lengthy criminal history, including kidnapping, rapes, and assaults. He was sentenced to prison multiple times. His last arrest occurred in August 2011. Later in 2012, he was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced. He remained incarcerated from 2011 until his death in March of 2018. Once our team identified Jackson, they continued forward, learning more about his activities throughout the years. They coordinated with our partners at the Cleveland Police Department in the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. As we work to solve additional crimes Jackson may have committed, I would like to note for our law enforcement partners and the public that we identified 2 vehicles used by Jackson. First, a 1984 Chestnut Brown AMC Eagle, which we believe may have been the vehicle used during the time Lolly and Julie were murdered. The picture shown is a similar depiction of the vehicle. It is not the actual vehicle. Second, we identified a 1979 model Ford Econoline van that he was using at the time of his 2011 arrest. The photo depicted is the actual van. Jackson was known to use temporary tags, alter license plates, and frequently changed vehicles. We can now also confirm that Jackson, a residential painter by trade, was an avid hiker with past interests in travel to Shenandoah National Park.
On the night of July 5th, 2024, 15 days after it was announced by the FBI that the Shenandoah murders case was solved, the prime suspect in the case, Daryl David Rice, was struck by a vehicle while riding a bicycle in Chariton County, Missouri. The 56-year-old was airlifted to hospital where he was pronounced dead. I think the argument that Richard Allen was just there that day doesn't mean he did it might be a moot point because of the video and the audio and the time, which will come from the metadata revealing the video was recorded that day. I know there was a good Delphi researcher on Reddit who, I believe, got the metadata and found out the video and/or audio were created with Adobe Premiere Pro 2018 and 2019, I believe not so long before the April 2019 press conference. I think the location that came up of where it was perceived to have been recorded is a moot point because of the location of where the video was recorded, and as long as the time and date are accurate, then I don't see why it's an issue, and the defense hasn't really bothered to say it wasn't. I think conspiracy theorists believe the video was planted or edited by some Kokomo crew member or Odinist or a family member or something, and that Allen is being framed that way. The crime scene in a wooded area with water, where numerous people may have walked through, would make it a difficult task to acquire DNA, and the DNA that the investigators did acquire and had put through genetic genealogy testing might be weak, and it might be touch DNA with X amount of markers and not enough to make a direct match, but may possibly be able to rule persons of interest out. Rick Allen's defense team's private investigator, Matt Hoffman, claimed the prosecution has nothing against Rick Allen, but I'm unsure of what he would define evidentiary-wise as being nothing. Many people in the Allen is innocent crowd believed, and a couple of them were almost 100% sure that Ron Logan was Bridge Guy, and I think their belief became stronger when the search warrant affidavit was leaked out to the public. I can see how people could be brainwashed when there was no arrest and that they were still desperate for an answer. This clip above is not the best comparison because you have to take into account resolutions of the videos, aspect ratio, and other variables in how Bridge Guy was recorded by Libby. I personally thought Ron Logan was not involved at all until the search warrant affidavit, where I considered his possible involvement, but I did not have the full context of the situation in regards to Ron Logan's alibi, and the person who wrote up the affidavit padded the affidavit out to make Ron Logan seem more guilty, when the reality was he asked his cousin to lie because he was on a probation violation and was concerned he would go to prison. I think Ron Logan is just taller than Bridge Guy, and the same comparison could be made with Daniel Pearson. And I think there's a video of him walking on the bridge at a distance where you can clearly see both Daniel and Ron Logan's legs are longer, and Bridge Guy's jeans bunch up at the bottom, and he looks like a man of shorter stature. There's been people who've put out images on their YouTube channel of pics that has been claimed to be at the Monon High Bridge Trail in Delphi, which shows a wooden cage like set up with a wooden board with chains attached to it connected to the wooden cage. I don't believe this was in Delphi, I could be wrong, but I heard that this was set up by someone in a wooded area in Lafayette about 45 minutes away, and the photos were not taken at the bridge. Someone pointed out on Reddit that the foliage did not match the time of year and date when the murders occurred or the area of the Mananhai Bridge. The person who allegedly took the photos said that he walked them woods, and what he saw was horrifying piles of animal bones, multiple types of animal deer heads hanging. And he claimed the crime was practiced on animals. He claimed the police know who he is and refused to charge the killer because that it will ruin a family name from Carroll County. Richard Allen allegedly said he killed the girls using a box cutter, and a box cutter can do some serious damage if used with force at a human's neck area. A utility knife or box cutter can come in different variations, like a 2-in-1 utility knife with a box cutter and a folding knife. On some of the utility knives, the box cutter blade can be switched and a serrated blade can be attached to it. I'm not sure if it's clear that he said he used a CVS box cutter, but I think if the blade is sharp enough, it could do some damage. And in other countries, gangs have used a box cutter, also known as a Stanley knife in the UK, and have been used as murder weapons. The phones the defense claimed were in and around the crime scene. The defense have misinterpreted information, not understanding how GPS works or geofencing, and that the phones were not moving in and around the crime scene at times when the murders would have been taking place. And they also know that those 3 phones are not any of their Odinist third-party names who they brought up in the 136-page memorandum, and the people who own the phones have nothing to do with the crime. The defense have tried to manipulate and twist information to try to confuse and think they stepped over ethical boundaries a long time ago. I think confusion is Allen's defense team's main strategy going forward to try to create some reasonable doubt. I think Richard Allen, on the probability scale, is most likely the killer. He owns a Sig Sauer, which matches the bullet, maybe not a perfect match 100%, and subjectivity might come into play, but if you put that with the totality of the evidence, I see him being convicted. I don't think at this point it's going to be a huge factor, and the charges are important here. He's got 2 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of murder. How is he going to magically be found not guilty of all 4 charges? I find it unlikely he will. Rick Allen's defense want the jury to see the crime scene, and the reason I believe they want them to see the crime scene is to try to confuse and to try to make out that one person could not commit the crime on their own. I think it's too dangerous for a jury to travel there, and I don't think going to the bridge at this point would be an accurate representation, considering the CPS building has been taken down and alterations have occurred on the bridge. I think this is just another gameplay by the defense. Maybe if the trip to the bridge could be modified in some way, it could be fine, but I think it wouldn't accurately represent the timeline and how things went down on February 13th, 2017. Rick Allen's defense filed 4 motions for transport of Indiana Department of Corrections inmate filings on the 10th of October, 2024. One for James Chadwell, who is an inmate at Newcastle Correctional Facility. He is serving a 90-year sentence without being eligible for parole for at least 70 years for his attack on a 9-year-old girl, which occurred on April 19, 2021. I was told from what I consider a good source that Chadwell had an alibi for the 13th of February 2017. I believe he made 2 or 3 Facebook posts that day. One of them showed a woman working on a car wearing a gray hoodie. Keegan Klein was another inmate also from the Newcastle Correctional Facility, whom the defense wants transported to court as a witness. Keegan Klein spoke to ISP Detective David Vito in 2020 in an interrogation interview. David Vito lied to him and exaggerated, claiming his phone was at his cousin's house, when it later turned out his phone was active, along with his dad's at his home in Peru, Indiana, when the murders were occurring. I didn't think the Kleins were involved after about 3 months from the Anthony shots information was released, but I was sure he wasn't connected after about 2 months from when Rick Allen was arrested. Doug Carter talks a good game, and he's a spokesman for ISP and attempts to try to protect the case and the integrity of the investigation. I think they were desperate with the Keegan Klein-Anthony shots angle, and it was more of a Hail Mary attempt. Keegan Klein lied about him and his father, and ISP spent a lot of money on a 5-week river search, which ended up being a fruitless attempt to find a knife in a phone. A Dropbox logs IP addresses from the person downloading files, and people tried to suggest maybe the connection was through that, but there's so many child predators out there. One of them who was connected to the Anthony Shots account was from India and had multiple catfish profiles like Keegan. Richie Dale Davis Jr. is another inmate the defense want to transport from Newcastle Correctional Facility. He is serving a 50-year sentence for a Class A felony charge of dealing methamphetamine within 1,000 feet of a youth program center. Davis Jr., who on his Facebook profile from 2013 claimed he was a dairy farmer, also had posts of swastikas on his social media profiles and seems to be into neo-Nazism. He also seems to be into tattoos, and his Instagram profile from 2010 suggests that he might have been a tattoo artist. James Haas is another inmate Allen's defense want to transport from Indiana State Prison to Carroll County. James Haas is serving time for murdering a 62-year-old man named Richard Houchin, who lived in Carroll County, by shooting him in the head twice from a small caliber firearm. The crime occurred in August 2017. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison for murder on February 26, 2018. James Haas was the inmate who briefly shared a cell with Ron Logan and claimed that Ron was masturbating while saying Abby's name over and over, and that he wrote a letter claiming Ron had made a confession to him that he killed Libby and Abby. Barbara McDonald also claimed that a guard heard him say that. I don't know if any of that is true. I think the defense want to confuse and perhaps play games to try to create more reasonable doubt by bringing in these witnesses to Allen's trial. I think maybe there's a method to the madness, but I don't really see much point in this for the defense. The defense also want to bring in Max Baker, the intern who went to visit Richard Allen when he was at Westville Prison. I think they want to bring him in so he can say how Allen was mistreated and how his mental health had been deteriorating. I view this as a bit of a desperate attempt, but I agree that he should probably be allowed to be a witness for the defense. The defense want to bring in forensic metallurgist William Tobin, who used to work for the FBI. Indianapolis lawyer David Hennessy used him to help him get his client's case thrown out in relation to bullet evidence. The result was later overturned through the Supreme Court, and Hennessy's client was convicted. The context was different in that case in relation to the bullet evidence. I think William Tobin should be allowed in, and I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of difference personally. I've gone through thousands of cases now and watched hundreds and hundreds of trials, and on average I don't feel like the odds are in favor of the defense in regards to the bullet evidence. There's different ways they could connect Allen to the gun outside of impressions or striations, whether people believe it's junk science or not. I don't, because I think there's some legitimacy to it looking at newer peer-reviewed research studies, which according to Indiana law, subjectivity comes into play, and I don't think it will be a problem for the prosecution. If there was no chain of custody like the defense claimed, then that could be a problem for the prosecution, but I'm skeptical if the defense were being honest, because they seem to have not persevered by bringing that issue up more often through their motions. I saw that prosecutor Nick McClelland paid William Tobin $5,000, but I haven't seen the full context as to why he did and if he actually wanted to use him as an expert or not. Rick Allen's defense in their first Frank's motion claimed Tony Liggett lied about what Sarah Carbaugh told him about the man she saw, and that he claimed she told him that he was muddy and bloody, and not just muddy, and that she saw a man wearing a blue jacket and not brown. Sarah Carbaugh also said that it looked like he had been in a fight. I think he may have been relayed the information, and the information was just not correct, or he just misinterpreted what she said from a statement. I could see how he would think she said muddy and bloody because she said the man she saw looked like he had been in a fight. I just think it was a simple mistake. The defense also claimed in the Odinist memorandum that Tony Liggett framed Richard Allen to become sheriff in 2022. I just wonder, why would Tony Liggett use a bullet with impressions, which might be considered junk science, to frame Allen instead of using a box cutter or a type of knife from Allen's home? Why not just go to the CVS, get his DNA from an item, and plant it at the scene? He's this mastermind working with Indiana State Police to frame Rick Allen, but he uses a bullet over evidence which would be more slam dunk like a knife from Allen's home or a box cutter with the victim's DNA on it. The defense wants some of the prison guard testimonies to not be allowed to be used from prison guards, inmates, law enforcement officers, and possibly the testimony of other Indiana Department of Correction staff members because the defense don't believe they have the understanding or expertise to understand Richard Allen's mental health issues when he was making his alleged incriminating statements. I think this is another desperate attempt. It seems that the psychologist who was assessing Richard Allen, Dr. Monica Walla believed to some extent that maybe Allen was faking or maybe exaggerating his mental health issues. I think both can be true, that he was faking or exaggerating and that he had genuine mental illness. I'm hoping the murder trial of Richard Matthew Allen goes smoothly and that there will be some kind of solid conclusion with no question marks left at the end of the trial. I know there are a lot of egos in the true crime community and in the Delphi community, and I don't really get it, to be honest, because true crime is a niche genre, but sensationalism sells, conspiracies sell, and the kinds of videos which promote that gets the most clicks and views. I think some people need validation and attention, but they may have their heart in the right place. I can't deal with people who are conspiracy theorists who have answers for everything and who continuously want the case to be more than what it is and constantly need to one-up you. Sometimes a spade is a spade, you know. It is what it is, and you're entitled to believe Rick Allen is innocent and will be found not guilty of all the charges if you want. Who knows, maybe he will, and I will be completely wrong. The prosecution has to prove their case, and I want to hear what evidence they do present at the trial. True crime is just an interest and hobby to me. I burn the candle at both ends, and sometimes it's a struggle to make videos because I have a career that I'm primarily focused on, and I put most of my energy into that. This case has been haunting, and I've had some good memories, but I've also had some bad memories too. I haven't got much enthusiasm left for this case, and I've been burned out with it for a while, and now I just want it to be over. This will be my last regular video on the Delphi case, and I might make a short at the ending of the trial.